Welcome everybody anyway to the Menzies Research Centre's National Security Network Forum. We're very lucky today, of course, to have Stuart Roberts, the Assistant Defence Minister, speaking to us at this second forum. But to the commercials first, we've been producing a series of very, I think, very sharp and provocative publications at the Menzies Research Centre. Can everybody hear me okay, by the way? Yeah. Which we call the R.G. Menzies Essay Series. The first you may have seen last year was Quiet Achievers, the New Zealand Path to Reform, which has got quite a sting in the tail, although it seems to be about New Zealand. Many of the themes to do with reform and how it's done resonate here. The second one is just out, and you'll be able to get this shortly. On fairness, we decided to look at this whole debate about what's fair in politics, and we decided that really the idea of fairness as it's currently portrayed is not very helpful at all. That really a truly compassionate and truly fair policy is based much more on the principles that Robert Menzies espoused in liberalism than the sort of things that are put around today. But the contributors in here, Kelly O'Dwyer, Henry Ergas, Rebecca Weiser, who's here in the audience, Alexandra Scaife, and Ian Duncan Smith. It's actually a reprint of his John Howard lecture that he gave a couple of years ago. But to the third one, a third of our R.G. Menzies Essays series, and one that I think will be really of interest to everybody here, it's Game Plan by Ross Babbage. And Ross Babbage is making in this monograph the case for a new Australian grand strategy. Ross, just very quickly, I might invite you up. We'll have a very quick word with you about this. It seems to me, I mean, we've talked in our conversations about this idea, we talk about digital disruption. I see we've got the Minister for Communications here. We're in an era of also strategic disruption, it seems to me, when the world is changing in many different ways, presenting challenges and opportunities. Is that as you see it?
Absolutely, but I think everyone in this room would know that there's some very big changes, not just ripples of change, but major tidal shifts taking place in the global strategic environment, but particularly in the Indo-Pacific. And it's going to mean major issues for this country to face up to. And that's really what this paper addresses rather directly. What are these big shifts? It identifies 12, goes and assesses each of them and the implications for what we should be doing.
Yeah, and what was the thought? What's the elevator pitch, if you like, for this book?
The big issue really is that I came to the conclusion. In fact, I did this in close partnership with some pretty senior officials in closed workshops. We came to the conclusion that just doing what we're doing now ain't going to cut it over the next 20 to 25 years. We're going to have to do some significantly different things, and in particular in our long-term investments. And those decisions are going to be really critical, and we need to be very careful in assessing what they should be and what capabilities are going to make best sense, because the judgment, I think, really is, and it comes out of the back of this paper, there needs to be some new thinking about our strategy. How are we going to cope with this changed environment? What are the strategy options? It discusses a number of possibilities, and then it makes some suggestions about how this country can have enhanced security despite the fact that the strategic environment is going to be more demanding for us.
Thanks, Ross. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
I'm very appreciative, Ross, for bringing this to us. A game plan, you can, in with your programs today, you'll see a card, and on the back you can fill in and pre-order from 1 to any number of copies. And we hope to be announcing the launch date for that shortly, probably in the first couple of weeks of July, and we'll let everybody know when that comes out. But to tonight's main bill, first of all, welcome to everybody here. Welcome to the Minister and the Assistant Minister, and of course to members and senators, and to our very good friends here, particularly to Raytheon, who have been our inaugural sponsors of this event, or partners as we like to call it. We are very much a market-driven think tank, as you know. We believe in the power of the market, and as a think tank we work that way too. So we would very much like to keep this series vibrant, to have plenty of these sessions in the parliamentary year. But to do that, of course, we do look to you for support. So if you feel that your company might want to become a supporter of this series and help us, then we'd love to hear from you, because we do rely on that really to promote and keep these events going. But tonight's session came out of a conversation that I had with the Assistant Defence Minister, Stuart Robert, some time ago, really we were thinking about the future of the Defence Force, looking at doing some blue sky thinking about what was around the corner. And the Minister made some very interesting remarks to me about the nature of the personnel, the nature of the Defence Force people, our most important asset when it comes to defence, and how inevitably this will change with the changing demands, the changing strategic outlook, which Ross talks about in his forthcoming monograph, but also in some extent with the change in attitudes in society and with technology, the new demands that will come from that. So I thought it would be a very good idea to invite the Assistant Minister to come and talk on those things a bit further and the broader themes of the defence arena as he sees it. Stuart Roberts, you know, spent 12 years serving in the military. He also has degrees in business and, you help me out here, IT, that's right. So what better background could you have for somebody who's looking at Defence Force from a really new, modern perspective? He was elected the member for Fadden, and as soon as this government was elected, he was made Assistant Defence Minister. He's regarded, I think, widely within the defence community as somebody who really is thoughtful and thinks ahead on these issues and takes really a very rational, intelligent approach to this complex but important area. So without further ado, let me introduce to you to give tonight's talk, Stuart Robert.
Now, Nick, you've got a speech below there, which I'm probably going to use. I'm good, but I'm not that good. It is a crack of a speech. Thank you. Good evening. I could just make it up and no one would know. Malcolm, good to see you here, my other ministerial colleagues, friends of the Menzies Research Centre and industry leaders. Thank you for the opportunity to come and share some thoughts about personnel and where things are going. I was reflecting upon some remarks. I had some time last week, went out with the ambassador on a Northrop Grumman C2 and landed on the George Washington out in the Coral Sea. Very cool if you get the opportunity. 200 kilometres an hour down to 0 and 30 metres. And then when you take off, of course, 0 to 250 kilometres an hour. But the captain of the ship thought he'd give us an object lesson in national power. So I pulled us out onto the deck of the George Washington's hammering down with rain. We literally stood in the middle while he just launched carrier deck ops and launched Super Hornets off and E2s off and helicopters off and then launched them back on again. And it was one of the most extraordinary applications of combat power I've seriously witnessed. The amount of moving parts, literally in the fog, you couldn't see, in the pouring down rain, and the breathless ease in which the last great superpower demonstrated its combat power. It was extraordinary. But as I stood there and watched these enormous moving parts, it became evident there was about 100 people on the deck of this carrier. There were aircraft moving everywhere, but everyone knew what they had to do and where they had to go and where they had to be. It was colour-coded, but it was an extraordinary view of what man and women power, of personnel power, can do. A machine is one thing. Operated in the hands of competent people, you start to get a capability. And that's what I wish to put some thoughts on this evening, is how is it that people turn applications, machines, equipment into capability? Now, it's natural, the impending white paper coming out, commentators, pundits, practitioners, thought leaders will start to focus on the big strategic questions that deal with acquisition of future equipment, strategic landscape, what are the 12 great questions one needs to know and to get answered. They are important questions for discussion. Billions of dollars will be expended on them. 10-year capability plans will be laid out. The current security environment globally dictates that the wider community is now more engaged than ever before on these matters of security and state. And for practitioners and commentators, the weeks preceding the white paper will provide an enormous amount of fertile ground for this discussion. But for all of the strategy, for all of the gear, for all the whiz-bang, for all of the carriers, it matters little unless the right people are in the right place with the right qualifications doing the right things. It's people that turn the George Washington into a potent capability. People matter. So this evening I wish to talk about our people. And ultimately, our defensive posture, our capacity to project force, is inextricably linked to the calibre of our people. I'll speak at length about some concepts, about realising military capability through diversity, a strange term, and about military capability through flexibility. But let me first of all set some scenes. The profession of arms, idiosyncratic nomenclature I'm sure, is one we're all familiar with. Indeed, it's a profession now arguably more important than any other time in human history. Soldiers are no longer simply operators, and nor really are pilots. Today, our personnel, even at the lowest levels, are quite strategic decision makers. They operate in a very, very complex battle space, one where rules of engagement are often changing, international law is often put aside, scrutiny by the media is pervasive. Our junior decision makers have to make decisions. Many of these decisions will be critiqued by numerous censors watching what they do. In 1999, US Marine General Charles Krulak coined the phrase the strategic corporal. In essence, he was arguing that the information age had thrust military operations into the homes of the general public, and tactical decision makers made by the lowest ranking junior commanders have very real strategic consequences. I was in Afghanistan when a young American soldier lit up his minigun at a bus that failed to stop at a checkpoint, killing 50 women and children. The bus driver simply didn't see the message to stop. The American commander at the time argued to put the war back 3 months. A strategic decision at the lowest of levels. Think of what happened at Abu Ghraib, which were predominantly tactical decisions made at a tactical junior level with far-reaching conclusions. Now, more than ever, it's incumbent upon our tactical commanders or our decision makers to understand the impact of these strategic level decisions made by our strategic corporals. Because smaller and smaller units are now dominating the battle space. In World War I, it took 1,200 men to dominate 1 square kilometre. In World War II, it took a company, 100 men to dominate a kilometre. In Vietnam, a platoon patrolling could dominate an area of approximately 10 square kilometres. In modern theatres in the Middle East and Iraq and Afghanistan, a combat team based on a section, highly mobile, modern weapons, able to call on close air support with JTAC, is now able to be used as a building block, add in surveillance technologies, complex ISR, UAVs, ground surveillance radars and other assets, and a small mobile team can effectively command an entire valley. We've seen the success of our female engagement teams in Afghanistan that facilitated greater access to populations in areas without provoking cultural tensions. Indeed, it's argued that they were able to engage more than 50% of the population, women and children. Indeed, these teams were integral to the coalition force effect. Now, the professionalism of arms obviously goes beyond the expanded decision-making and influencing exerted by strategic corporals. For example, force elements that were normally assigned at brigade and division level are now being devolved to lower company and battalion level to ensure warfighters have what they need and when they need it. So advanced weaponry is now being utilised at the most junior of levels. It is not uncommon, or was not, on the Afghanistan battlefield to see pairs of reconnaissance helicopters as well as A-864s, infantry fighting and combat reconnaissance vehicles in direct support, artillery as well as mortars supporting a young platoon commander stuck in a firefight. UAVs are now monitoring the every move of manoeuvre units, even down to special force patrols of 4 men. The introduction of the Joint Strike Fighter the use of AWACS and refuelers will see pilots and aircraft dominate the skies from one horizon to the next. Growler, a single platform, can ensure that an entire city's comms are rendered useless. Put simply, the application of sophisticated combat power is allowing our people to do amazing things at extraordinarily junior levels. And this has an implication for the modern battle space. So to meet Defence's mission, clearly we need to have the right people able to exercise not just this dazzling array of equipment, but also to be able to have the skill sets, the competencies, the maturity, the linguistic capacities, the cultural understanding, the geopolitical nuances to be able to wield some of this gear. It is an extraordinarily big ask of what we require from our people. That means we have to attract the very best people with the skills and attributes we need. We need to invest in them, and we have to work hard to retain them. Which begs the question, where do we get these people from? The 2005 White Paper will document the need for a greater set of science, technology, engineering and maths or STEM-skilled people for the defence enterprise of the future. This is not to say it'll be easy for us to recruit these people with skills. We'll have to compete, and compete not just with other agencies, but with sectors like Apple and Google. When we lose a crypto analyst 6 months ago, being paid about $150 in ASD to Google, who put $1 million as the opening offer on the table, you start to get a view of the challenge we have in retaining people. It's therefore useful to understand what trends exist with respect to these types of people that we, the defence enterprise, are going after to get an idea of who they are. For example, 75% of engineering students at RMIT don't look like me. They are not born in Australia. 90% of students studying mathematics at Melbourne University don't look like me. Or, by the way, don't look like 99% of you in the room. Indeed, 26% of all Australians were born overseas. When you add in one or more parents, that is 46% of all Australians were born overseas. 20% of Australians right now at home do not speak English at home. Yet 94.2% of the ADF looks like me. And by the way, 94.2% of this room looks like me. The conclusion, therefore, for me, and by the way, the conclusion for you as defence executives and leaders of the nation's companies, is that I and you are not tapping into, so it would seem, the full resources available to the nation if everyone looks like me. If the ADF is to truly represent the Australian community, then the full range of Australian community needs to be represented within the ADF. 46% born overseas, including one or more parents, only 5.8% of our ADF. In March this year, I made a capability through diversity statement in Parliament outlining the government's strategy to increase the ADF's diversity. It was not about social engineering. I'll leave that to the Labor Party. It was not about feeling good. I'm not interested in feeling good. It was about combat power and how do we generate future combat power in a changing nation like Australia. Because increasing the diversity of Australia's Defence Force will harness our greatest strengths, the diversity of our population. If we are going to tap into the STEM skills we need in the future, the linguistic, cultural competence and technical skills, we will have no choice but to widen the diversity outlook of the ADF. No choice. At the same time, Defence has struggled to regain or to retain highly skilled people after investing heavily in them. So today I'll also expand on the concept of capability through flexibility. This refers to a suite of reforms that will help Defence retain and more effectively use our talented people. So our defence capability will be strengthened, both through diversity and through flexibility. Firstly, diversity. It started under the previous regime with their pathway to change, evolving Defence's culture, with an unambiguous statement that diversity and inclusivity are crucial to Defence's ability, our ability to operate at peak performance. Pathways to change articulated an intent, trusted to defend, proven to deliver and respectful always. Our government maintained that, kept that and is continuing to drive that. And I'll reiterate the straightforward rule I give everywhere I go across the military. I don't care whether you're male or female, gay or straight, black or white, yellow or red. All I care about is the capacity to deliver combat power. In our military, everyone fights. If you don't meet the standard for infantry, male or female, you won't serve in the infantry. If men who are currently serving don't meet the standards, I will punt them, be under no doubt. Everyone fights, and you will respect the person you fight next to, regardless of whether they are male, female, black, red, gay or straight. It is irrelevant, because we're not about social engineering, we're about the application of combat power. Diversity initiatives are about combat power. We have some way to go. 57,400 in the ADF uniform, but only 3,300 identifying themselves as non-English speaking background. 12% of the ADF were born outside of Australia. But when you take away the ABCA countries, we're left with a bit over 3,000, or 5.5 to 5.8%. We need to do more if we are going to tap in to the vital skills of the people we need to tap into. We simply don't have a choice. In the Capability through Diversity statement I made to the Parliament, I identified the following key objectives for Defence. We need to increase our diversity to deliver specific capability benefits, including linguistic capability. I'm horrified to think the Department of Foreign Affairs, only 10% of their professional public servants speak a different language. The Department of Foreign Affairs. Defence, it is a lot less. I'm asking my defence organisation, why do we accept the Australian Defence Force Academy, the cauldron of our future officers, doing degrees where there is no requirement for them to speak a foreign language? How is it in today's age we are graduating people with no capacity to connect linguistically with our regional neighbours? Other objectives including a strategic advantage for the ADF, particularly in future operations, growing the capability by providing greater access to the STEM skills, and ensuring that the composition of the ADF better aligns with the broader Australian community. Community needs to look upon its ADF as its ADF, not as an ADF that is foreign to them and their way of life. It's in the very nature of military to be prepared to deploy overseas in support of Her Majesty's loyal interests. And today that means being culturally and linguistically prepared. The government also expects our people to be actively involved in building international relationships. Today, our fighting men and women are in 14 overseas operations, 8 of them in the Middle East. They're training soldiers in Iraq, Afghanistan in mentoring. They are involved in headquarter operations. They're guarding the peace. They're capturing drug smugglers in the Middle East. They're protecting our borders close at home. They're delivering international humanitarian assistance. They're looking for aircraft. They're delivering relief in Nepal and Vanuatu and long-standing peacekeeping missions. In all of these, our people are working very closely with other cultures, and being sensitive to them and being able to communicate with them is reasonably key. At the same time, we're engaging with our international partners, our regional allies, with ASEAN, with NATO, with non-government operators, independent organisations and international actors. We need to be able to connect seamlessly with them. Defence will need broader linguistic and cultural skills. Now, we can draw on the diversity in our organisation, and we do already. At the beginning, I mentioned the female teams in Uruzgan province. We've also deployed Ukrainian speakers to support the Joint Task Force 659 in Kiev. Japanese flight sergeants as translators aboard the Japanese Konasi International Humanitarian Ship. Chinese-speaking Navy officer deployed at the at-sea liaison with the Chinese People Liberation Army Navy during the search for the Malaysian airline. And recently, Navy members of Melanesian descent deployed to assist with the response in Vanuatu and previous responses in Papua New Guinea and the Philippines. This will only become more acute in the future. And as we look down the barrel to 2035 as part of the White Paper, we will expect far greater regional engagement. Therefore, we will demand far greater cultural and linguistic competencies. To meet that requirement, we need to build a potent and capable ADF that will require vastly new skills of our people. We can't afford to constrain ourselves to the current talent pool that looks like me and you. We already have a good base of skills to build on, but we need to expand it. That means attracting people with those skills, and this is a difficult task. Many people who've come to Australia are fleeing militaries that aren't like me and aren't like you, who have come from countries where militaries aren't seen in the same light as our professional, talented military it is. Therefore, we need to create an environment that is attractive to people of different backgrounds to come and join. A part of this is ensuring that we can connect with a range of communities, and communities begin to see us as a choice for their sons and daughters. We need to target influencers, parents, community leaders, teachers, all important in saying to their younger people, the military is something you should be proud to join. For example, 8 mentors from the ADF and Defence APS are currently at the Inter-ACT at Victoria Barracks in Brisbane. This is a mentoring activity for recently arrived school-age migrants and refugees whose first language is not English. The program supports those students in gaining cultural and vocational literacy, but also sends the message to those recently arrived, the military is a great option for a career. In addition to ensuring that the people capability better reflects our community, we need to have people who have a great vocation in science, technology, engineering and maths. The market for these qualifications and skills is competitive. Yes, Google rolled out a lazy $1 million. It is the most extreme of examples. Other companies, dare say some in this room, maybe not as generous, but are certainly as prolific. And that's the beauty of a free market, and that should be celebrated, and we do. Employment rates for those with STEM skills are atmospheric. All the Five Eyes countries are struggling with this. Australia is no different. To be competitive, we have to have candidates with the broadest cross-section of education. But recent data indicates that at least a quarter of Australia's overseas-born higher education student population is born in China. A quarter of Australia's overseas-born higher education population was born in China. India, 6%, further 16% in Europe and 13% in Africa and the Middle East. Of those born with a higher, or those born outside of Australia with a higher level STEM qualification, 10% in India and 7% in China, and these numbers are increasing. This indicates increasing the representation of culturally and linguistically diverse personnel can be a great capability multiplier for us. It'll increase and improve cultural competence, but will also give us a wider connection to a wider pool of people. To this end, Defence Force recruiting has now begun to focus its efforts on intentionally recruiting from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, such as health, engineering and IT. There is a specific focus plan from Defence recruiting and a specific media plan to engage with these areas of the community. We've also undertaken a research program to look at how we better attract candidates from the Australian population. The updated research program is covering Chinese, Indian, Vietnamese, South European and the Islamic parts of wider Australia. Work is also underway to ensure that those culturally and linguistically diverse communities, as well as people with STEM skills, are attracted and recruited into non-military positions. What you will start to see, I hope, and it's only taken me 2 years, is that rather than having a whole range of defence ads out there, where one face out of the 20 doesn't look like me, maybe have 4 or 5 out of the 20 that doesn't look like me. In terms of retention, attracting and recruiting people with these diverse backgrounds is only part of what we're trying to do. We have to skill them and retain them. We can increase this capability by identifying those already working in defence and using them to assist us. Retention will become vital as we move forward as the race for skills heats up. One of the ways we're also approaching that is with a total workforce model to deliver a whole range of reforms. The total workforce model, which I launched in November 2003, it's called Project Suakin. It was dealing just with the reserves, and we took it out and made it right across the ADF. It's about supporting capability to allow our people to use their entire skills and capabilities with a degree of flexibility. It introduces a versatile service arrangement within our total workforce model. A core component of this model is a service spectrum of full-time and part-time service categories. This Thursday, I'll introduce legislation to establish an enduring, flexible service arrangement for the permanent ADF. For the first time in the history of our nation, people will lawfully be able to seek to work part-time. You say, but it happens now. It does, but we make it up. If there are two people wishing to work part-time, a canny CO will have one position, another one sitting somewhere in the queue store unused. We'll post the person to that and simply share the capacity for them to work part-time. This will lawfully make it so. Today, the Defence Act, Naval Defence Act and Air Force Act mandates continuous full-time service, which has all sorts of implications for superannuation. In practice, it's almost impossible to be part-time without a benevolent commanding officer. In the future, permanent ADF members will be able to apply to enter into service arrangements which provides them with flexibilities as their circumstances change, cognizant of the wider ADF capability requirements. Don't expect to see one RER applying to be flexible part-time on day one. Service needs, as always, are preeminent in the order when it comes to personal requirements. Those of us who've served know that only too well. This new flexible service operation is a good solution for some areas of our ADF. It is more adaptable and more easily able to meet the needs of our people. I envisage an ADF which resembles somewhat of Angus Campbell's career, where people can move forward in their career, take a year or two out and work with IBM or Raytheon or Rolls-Royce, or go and do study, or follow their partner overseas and come back without losing time in rank, where someone can go part-time because of a birth of a child and come back in again. If we are going to compete for those STEM skills in a resource-constrained world where we're all fighting for the same things, we need to have some capacity to compete in the marketplace. We need to be a modern and responsive employer. Our offering now is good. We think that the flexibility will make us the military best practice in terms of player. This will require a big adjustment to our workforce culture, be under no doubt. I'm not too sure some of the service chiefs are thanking me right now. It will assist us in the years ahead. We've looked at addressing the existing barriers to flexibility. We've considered the personal costs, the technical difficulties and the attitudinal barriers that currently inhibit members from exercising greater opportunities for greater flexibility. We've researched and identified a whole range of impediments. For example, we have 14 critical categories for personnel in Navy. 15 years ago, we had 14 critical categories in Navy. So for 14 years, we've sought to address it. We have made one change where two of them have gone from critical to perilous. I've instructed Chief of Navy, he has 3 years to make it none. Everything is on the table, there are no sacred cows. And the Chief of Navy started doing things like he had to move a ship somewhere, he would get 100 MTs and shove them on the ship. That ship's moving from A to B, from Tonga to Vanuatu, from Sydney to Broome. That ship did its ship thing, and the rest of the time they trained MTs. I've said to the Chief of Navy, everything is on the table. If he needs to have 3 engineering petty officers down below, one of them joined as an able seaman and went through recruit school and knows all the history and traditions of the Navy. Another one may well be a petty officer technical. Create a new rank, Chief of Navy. I don't care. Solve the problem. Who is someone from industry whose job is to do the MT, the work on the engines, who is a technical specialist. It is on the table. If there are opportunities to transfer people from other services to assist, it's on the table. Accordingly, be pleased to know we have now posted 3 of our sailors to the Forward Performance Racing team on the V8 circuit. 2 of them are MTs, technicians, and one's an AT working in composites. Why? Because the V8 supercar circuit is the most advanced when it comes to mechanical engineering and to the use of composites, especially when the car hits a wall. And our people are coming back with skills Navy could never have taught them and a healthy return of service obligation that goes with it. Everything is on the table to start solving our critical capabilities because doing the same thing in the past has not worked. There will be some challenges. We know that. 3 main reasons ADF members cite for taking no action when they seek flexibility is 36% believe the requests won't be approved. I see nothing's changed. Concerns about the effect of the team, concerns about the effect on their career. We also know that there's work to be done to enable our people to work outside the limitations of what the service puts on its people as the ideal worker, one who offers unrestricted, uninterrupted service. Flexibility will be a challenge, but it's a core part of our commitment to make Defence an employer of choice, especially for women. Women are currently 15.3% of our workforce. They're 50% of our population. Unless we address some of their wider needs, we will never be able to tap into the latent talent they bring. A study last year found the concept of the ideal worker is particularly an issue for blokes in the ADF, because accessing formal flexible work arrangements requires them to challenge not only social gender norms but also organisational norms. And this is reflected in some of the figures. At June this year, 2% of female ADF members are on part-time leave without pay, 0.1% of male members. That means only 51 blokes are taking part-time leave without pay. In other words, if we don't create a culture of capability through flexibility and an acceptance that both male and female members can access flexibility where appropriate, we will lose skilled people. So in closing, our Capability Through Diversity program is intended to further increase our capacity to deliver capability by broadly aligning the composition of the ADF with that of the broader community. It will not be easy. It will be a challenge. But it'll also bring much needed competency, language skills and STEM qualifications. Our Capability Through Diversity will allow us to draw on a much wider talent pool and will be self-reinforcing as more and more Australians that don't look like me, or most of you, will come into the ADF. It'll ensure latent linguistic skills and other skills are identified and used. The intent is it'll also boost retention in terms of an environment and an area where people want to stay and invite their colleagues to come and join. We have no choice as we bring in some of the most advanced technology that the audience here produces corporately, unless we have some of the most advanced men and women to deploy and use those assets, the assets won't be able to be brought up to their full potential. We have to invest in the STEM skills. We have to become an employer of choice for all parts of the community. We have to reflect the community. The community needs to look at us as their ADF. And it must be an ADF where everyone serves and everyone fights, regardless of colour, sexuality, racial type, employment skills. Everyone fights and everyone is respected for the fight. If we can do that, we'll be in particularly good hands. If we can't, we'll have some of the best gear in the world and few people to operate it. Thank you.